1939, Sverdlovsk. The city is gripped by panic. In the classified reports of the NKVD, the Soviet secret police, a terrifying phrase appears: the Ural Monster. Someone is stealing children right from their yards, in broad daylight. Children aged 2 to 4. They are found in forests, on wastelands, in cesspools, strangled, mutilated. Detectives are running off their feet. They are looking for a hardened recidivist, an escaped convict, an adult, strong man, possibly a dwarf, judging by the footprints. The city is flooded with patrols. Hundreds of suspicious individuals have been detained, but the murders continue. No one guesses that the real monster walks among them, that he wears a pioneer tie, the symbol of the Soviet Youth Organization, that he studies singing excellently, and that his best friend is the future world-famous sculptor Ernst Neizvestny. When he is caught, even experienced investigators won't believe their eyes. Standing before them will be a 15-year-old schoolboy, Vladimir Vinnichevsky, the youngest serial killer in the history of the USSR to be sentenced to execution by firing squad. This is a story about how evil can hide behind the face of an innocent teenager, and about how parents themselves demanded death for their own son. Before we dive into this investigation, an important warning. This story is based on real events. We use materials from criminal case number 434, which was declassified only in 1991. We also rely on publications from the Uralsky Rabochi newspaper of that time and historical research. The video contains descriptions of crimes against children. If you are sensitive, please do not watch further. We tell this story not for shock value, but to understand the psychology of a criminal and show the work of detectives in one of the most difficult eras of our history. So, Sverdlovsk, late 1930s, a factory city. The industrial heart of the Urals. Here they are building Uralmash, a giant heavy machinery plant. Here the power of the Soviet Union is being forged. But behind the facade of labor feats lies a dark side. Barracks, overcrowding, many former prisoners who stayed here after construction projects. An ideal environment for someone to dissolve into the crowd. In 1938, alarming reports begin to arrive at the police. Children are disappearing. Small ones. Those who walked unsupervised. At first they thought accidents, got lost, fell into a pit. But when they started finding bodies with signs of violent death, it became clear. A serial killer is operating in the city. But who is he? And why does he choose such small victims? Portrait of the Invisible Man. Ordinary Soviet schoolboy? Let's look at the one the entire police force of the Urals was searching for. Vladimir Georgievich Vinnichevsky, born in 1923. The family by those standards was prosperous and even well off. Father, Georgy Ivanovich, a foreman in the city's communal services. Mother, Elizaveta Petrovna, an accountant. They live in a separate private house in the center of Sverdlovsk. Not in a barrack, not in a communal apartment. Volodya has his own room. He has things that other children could only dream of. A good suit, leather shoes, a real Swiss penknife. He even had a tank helmet, an object of envy for all the boys. Upon arrest, they will find more than 20 rubles of pocket money on him. For comparison, this is a factory worker's 2-day earnings. He studies at school number 16 in the 7th B grade. Studies, truth be told, poorly. He was held back a year. But he sings excellently, knows many songs by heart. Active, always ready to participate in school affairs. It would seem an ordinary guy. But this normality had another side, friendship with a genius. There is one fact that makes this story completely unique. Volodya Vinnichevsky's best friend was a boy living next door. They went to school together, visited the musical comedy theater together. This boy's name was Ernst. Surname, Neizvestny. Yes, That same Ernst Neizvestny, who years later would become a great sculptor, create the Mask of Sorrow monument, and enter into polemics with Khrushchev. But then, in 1939, Ernst was just a schoolboy who was friends with a future killer. What will he tell investigators about his friend? We will analyze these testimonies a little later, and they will surprise you. The monster's first steps. Investigators still do not know exactly when Vinnichevsky committed his first crime. He himself spoke of early episodes during interrogations, but it was impossible to find victims or their relatives. But we know exactly when the series began that went down in criminal history. Summer or early autumn of 1938. 4-year-old Gerta Gribanova is playing in the yard of her private house. The gate is open. Vinnichevsky, who is then only 15 years old, enters the yard. He is calm, confident. He approaches the girl. What does he talk to her about? Most likely promises to show something interesting, or simply takes her by the hand. He leads her into the vegetable garden. Pause, building tension. What happened next became the starting point for a massive investigation. Vinnichevsky strangles the child, and then inflicts 8 knife wounds on her, blows of such force that the blade breaks. A shard of the knife remains in the victim's skull. He abandons the body and leaves, throws away the broken knife handle. Vinnichevsky feels what? Fear? Remorse? No. He feels the taste of blood and realizes he wants to repeat this again. The Hunt. The series continues. Autumn of 1938. Winter of 1939. Vinnichevsky changes tactics. He understands. Killing in yards is dangerous. Need to lead victims further away. He invents a cover story. I am a pioneer. We have a komsomol assignment, collecting scrap metal. With this legend, he goes around yards, looks into sheds, looks out for children. Adults believe him. A pioneer, an activist, a good deed. No one sees a threat in him. He begins to tour. Sverdlovsk is already too tight for him. He goes to Nizhny Tagil, then to Kushva. In Kushva, he attacks 3-year-old Katya Lobanova, kills her. And the body? He throws the body into the cesspool of a public toilet. Why? To hide the smell, so the body isn't found for as long as possible. The cold-blooded calculation of a 15-year-old teenager. Survivors. But not all his attacks ended in death. There were those who managed to survive. And it was they who gave the investigation the first clues. Borya Titov, 4 years old. Vinnichevsky offered him a ride on a sled, took him to a wasteland, attacked, threw him into a snowbank. But the most cynical part, he took the sled. Just took the sled and left. Borya was found, saved. He told about the uncle who hurt him, but the description was vague. Alya Gubina, 3 years old, kidnapped in the spring of 1939. Vinnichevsky inflicted a knife wound on her, but abandoned her. Why? Because they started looking for her. He got scared of the noise. The girl survived. Raya Rakhmatulina, thrown into a cesspool. But she woke up, started screaming. She was heard and pulled out. These cases showed investigators one important detail. The criminal does not take children far. His radius of action is no more than 1 kilometer from the abduction site. This narrowed the search circle, but still gave no answer. Who is he? Errors of investigation. Detectives of the Sverdlovsk Criminal Investigation Department were at a dead end. Why couldn't they catch him? All evidence pointed to the killer being an adult. First, strength. To drag a child away, strangle, strength is needed for this. Second, cruelty. The sexual undertone of the crimes made them think of a pedophile maniac, a recidivist. Third, traces. The footprints were small. Investigators decided It's either a woman or a teenager or a dwarf. The dwarf version was worked on seriously. They checked all people of short stature, disabled people. No one could assume that the monster was a schoolboy from a good family who does homework in the evenings and goes hunting during the day. Summer of 1939. All cases are combined into one proceeding. An unprecedented operation begins. Sverdlovsk is flooded with hidden patrols. Cadets of the police school, dressed in civilian clothes, are on duty in parks, near kindergartens, in yards. The nets are set, but the monster continues to slip away. Capture. October 24th, 1939. This day became the last day of freedom for Vladimir Vinnichevsky, Slava Volkov, 3 years old, playing by the entrance of his house. A teenager approaches him. "Want to ride the tram?" Vinnichevsky takes the boy by the hand. They get on the tram, ride to the final stop. Medny Rudnik, copper mine. This is the outskirts of Uralmash, remote places, forest. The boy falls asleep on the tram. Vinnichevsky picks him up in his arms and carries him into the forest. But he doesn't know one thing. He is being watched. 3 cadets of the Sverdlovsk police school, Popov, Angelov, and Krylov. They were on patrol. They noticed a strange pair, a teenager with a small child who is clearly not his brother. Too big a difference in clothing, behavior too strange. The cadets followed, quietly, unnoticed. They saw Vinnichevsky carry the child into the forest, how he put him on the ground, how he began unbuttoning the collar of his coat. At that moment, they rushed at him. Vinnichevsky was caught red-handed. Fingernail marks remained on Slava Volkov's neck. He had already started strangling him. Interrogation. At the police station, they didn't believe at first that they had caught the Ural Monster himself. Before them sat a frail teenager, 16 years old. But when they started the search, doubts vanished. In his pockets, they found those same 20 rubles, and most importantly, a notebook. Diary of a Killer. Vinnichevsky kept a diary, but not a simple one. He recorded his crimes, in cipher. When investigators deciphered the notes, their hair stood on end. All episodes were described there, with dates, with details only the killer could know. He confessed, calmly, without hysterics, told about 18 attacks, about 8 murders. He told why he did it. "I liked watching them die. I got pleasure from it." The sexual motive was obvious, but Vinnichevsky described it as an experiment, as a game. Shock and trial. Society's reaction, the news of the capture of the Ural Monster, flew around Sverdlovsk instantly. People were in shock. Not a recidivist, not a dwarf, a schoolboy, a komsomol member. But the strongest blow awaited Vladimir's parents. Georgy Ivanovich and Elizaveta Petrovna Vinnichevsky, respected people. They couldn't believe it. They refused to believe. But the facts were irrefutable. And then they did something that today seems unthinkable. They wrote an open letter to the Uralsky Rabochi newspaper. Listen to these lines. "We, the parents, renounce such a son and demand that the supreme measure be applied to him. Execution by firing squad. There can be no life for such degenerates in a Soviet family." Parents demanded death for their child. Was this a sincere impulse, or fear of the system, an attempt to save themselves from repression? After all, being parents of an enemy of the people and a maniac in 1939 was a death sentence. The trial. The trial was swift. The lawyer tried to save Vinnichevsky. He insisted on insanity. Well, a normal person, a teenager, cannot do such things. The court agreed to appoint an examination. Vinnichevsky was sent to Moscow to the famous Serbsky Institute. The psychiatrist's verdict was unambiguous. Sane. Aware of his actions. No mental illnesses. This was a sentence. But there was one legal problem. Vinnichevsky was 16 years old. Can a minor be executed in the USSR? In 1935, a decree was adopted that allowed applying all measures of criminal punishment to minors starting from 12 years old, up to execution by firing squad. Formally, the law allowed it, but in practice, there were almost no such cases. Vinnichevsky became an exception. On January 16, 1940, the Sverdlovsk Regional Court delivers the sentence, the supreme measure of punishment, execution by firing squad. Last days. In the death row cell, Vinnichevsky changed. Where did his bravado go? Where did his calmness go? His friend, Ernst Niezvestny, recalled during interrogation, he was very meek, shy, said he didn't like sexual intercourse and never had any. And relatives recalled another phrase of his. Once Vinnichevsky was asked if he was afraid to walk on dark streets. After all, there is a maniac in the city. He replied, "Have to die sometime anyway." Now, when death stood at the threshold, he became afraid. He writes a petition for clemency. "I want to live. I am ready to redeem my guilt with blood. Send me to the front." At this time, the war with Finland was going on. Vinnichevsky wrote that he wanted to become a tankman. He begged to spare his life, promised to reform, but no clemency followed. Finale and paradoxes. Execution. On November 11, 1940, the sentence was carried out. Vladimir Vinnichevsky was 17 years and 5 months old. He was shot in the basement of the Sverdlovsk NKVD. The body, as was customary in the USSR, was not given to relatives. The burial place was classified. Thus ended the life of the Ural Monster. Irony of fate. But the story doesn't end there. In the 90s, the place of mass burials of those shot in Sverdlovsk was declassified. This is the 12th kilometer of the Moscow Tract. Thousands of people lie there, mostly victims of political repressions. Enemies of the people, intelligentsia, priests, ordinary workers who fell under the roller of the Great Terror. And there, in one of the common pits, lies Vladimir Vinnichevsky. The NKVD made no distinction between political prisoners and criminals during burial. Today, a memorial complex stands on this site. People come there to honor the memory of the innocently killed. And the main monument of the memorial became the sculpture Mask of Sorrow. The author of this sculpture is Ernst Niezvestny, that same Ernst who sat at the same desk with Vinnichevsky, who went to the movies with him, who considered him his friend. It turns out that Ernst Niezvestny erected a monument on the grave of his killer friend, without knowing it himself. A terrible, mystical irony of fate. Conclusions. Why? Why did a boy from a good family become a monster? Psychiatrists speak of psychopathy, of a complete lack of empathy. Vinnichevsky was a classic psychopath. He knew how to wear a mask of normality. He was charming when he needed to be. He knew how to ingratiate himself, but inside he had emptiness and a thirst for violence. His case is unique for criminology, a teenage serial killer acting with such cruelty and calculation. Lessons. What does this story teach us? That evil does not always look like evil. It can wear a pioneer tie and sing cheerful songs. That parents may not know who lives with them under the same roof, and that the system, even the toughest one like Stalin's, cannot always protect the most defenseless, children. 18 attacks, 8 lives. This is the price the city paid for failing to see a monster in an ordinary schoolboy. Finale. In the Ekaterinburg Police History Museum, there is a stand dedicated to this case. There lie photographs, copies of protocols, and that very tank helmet Vinnichevsky dreamed of so much. He wanted to become a hero tank man. but became the youngest executed maniac in the country's history. This story remains in the past, but it reminds us, be attentive to your children and to those who surround them, because sometimes monsters live next door. Thank you for watching.